Hello, it's Tuesday, 12:30, and welcome. I can't believe another week has gone by. Time is going so quickly now, but welcome to another week of the Mindset Michele TV show. And I'm so excited to invite you to join me today and my extra special guest, Karen Thompson-Anderson. Now, many people out there, I appreciate, are struggling a little bit with life at the moment and having issues come up because it is, let's face it, a fairly challenging time. And today's extra special guest, Karen, is here to talk to us about the link between resilience and a positive mindset. Now, Karen is this incredible woman who has a group called Wise Woman Rising. She owns a company, has founded a company called Activate Wellbeing, and she's studied and worked with people in this space around resilience and positive mindset for a number of years. So welcome, Karen.
Thank you so much, Michele. It's a delight to be here with you, and I have a sense of the times we're living in and how important it is to take care of one another with these sorts of conversations. So thanks for inviting me.
It's so lovely to have you on the show today. And do you want to share a little bit with people how you what was your journey to being interested in this space? What got you so passionate about well-being and positive mindsets?
Thank you so much. I just want to acknowledge the country I'm on. I'm on Wurundjeri country, coming to you from Melbourne today, and I'm just going to take a moment to hold the part of me that's excited and a little bit nervous, wants to contribute so much today to people being able to really connect. And I'm going to pick up my puppy because that's what he'd like. One sec.
Yeah, it sounds like he wants to connect and be part of it as well. So I think when you actually got to the part there where you were holding yourself in the country and in the space that we're creating today, your puppy obviously picked up on the hugs and wanted to get in on that as well. So isn't it lovely that your puppy was picking up on that lovely energy and wanted the hugging as well? So welcome, puppy. What's the puppy's name? Oops, you're on mute now, Karen, sorry. I think it might have been when you picked up the puppy.
Oh, yes. Look at this, we're already in the imperfection. Isn't it beautiful? I'm celebrating because it said that I couldn't unmute without you letting me do that. So thank you. I have a happy puppy on my knee who obviously, is tuned into this excitement of mine. And so, grateful he wanted a cuddle too. I have two little Jack Russells that are running around keeping me company. And I think that actually is a lovely segue because having a sense that we're seen and known and matter to others, and even if it's our animals, having a sense of company with our experiences in life, it's a precious thing. So celebrating all the animals out there who have kept us sane during these times too. There's a little bit of a brief story I'll give you, but it's more to share with you the sort of key things that have stood out for me in my life journey that have got me to here. The first is I grew up in a military family that was also Catholic. My dad was in the Air Force, and my mum was in the school system. She worked as the assistant to the principal, and in that family, we had a very strong sense of what was right, what was wrong, what was good and what was bad. And I don't know if you grew up with the wooden spoon in your family, Michele, did you?
We had more than a wooden spoon in my background, but also a bit of Catholicism in my high school years thrown in. So I appreciate some of the traditions that you're talking about there.
Yeah, thanks. So what I'm really getting is that these sorts of institutions and ways of teaching came from a place, it intended good for us, that we would somehow be taught well by being taught with the punishment and reward mechanism. And of course, as children, that's what we functioned with. That's how we came up in the world. I think what struck me was that I longed for more connection than that from a very early age. And I loved my parents, and I understood they were doing what they thought was right in terms of raising me. But I went off to uni to study communications because I think I was having this craving to be understood, and that this right, wrong, good, bad was suffocating in a way. I couldn't get connected to what I really wanted, what I wanted to say. You know, how could I be understood, and also how could I do better at avoiding the punishments, I suppose. But if I was a good communicator, maybe I'd avoid, you know, the pain and suffering of getting into trouble. So I started a very successful career, actually. I spoke at a conference overseas when I was still a student in public relations. I really loved this marketing, communications, PR world until I became a parent. I had this sort of shocking realization. Hang on a sec. I'm a communication person. Surely I should be able to work well in my family now. I've done all these years of study, and it failed me. I was at a loss as a parent and as a partner, and I think I was still struggling with this right, wrong, good, bad. I was starting to parent a bit like I'd been parented, and starting to have trouble with connection in my family. And I thought, surely there's got to be more than this, you know. And it happened one day. I was looking in a school newsletter, and there was a notice in there about something called nonviolent communication. A trainer was in a Steiner school, and the trainer was coming from the US or something. And I went, okay, what's that? I wonder what that is. And I spent a weekend immersing myself in this, what is this nonviolent communication? And there's a fellow called Marshall Rosenberg, an American, who'd come up with it and written a book. And in fact, I found there was a whole library of books about bringing nonviolent communication to life in all sorts of settings, school and workplace and family. And I sort of had an epiphany. Oh, there's another paradigm outside this binary right, wrong, good, bad. I don't need to parent my children with wooden spoons. Like, that's not how I want to do it. And actually, nonviolent communication gave me a pathway to start to see I could communicate my needs when I was impacted instead of trying to fix the other person. So it brought me back to a self-responsibility about my feelings, states, and my needs that I'm still practicing with today, because it's a lifelong journey when you've grown up with a right, wrong, good, bad paradigm that, it becomes a practice actually more than I'm getting it right or I'm getting it wrong. It becomes a practice of like, how can I use my language to support me to connect rather than to create those arguments about strategies. So the last piece of my story is that it came to be that my husband really struggled with his right, wrong, good, bad history to such an extent that his trauma started to rise up in our family context, and he spent 15 years really struggling. There was addiction and all sorts of difficulties that he navigated as in his attempt to restore himself from his early life, and working with the pain of what that had been for him. And my programming all wanted to go, that's wrong and bad, and punish him and make him, fix him and get him help. And I tried all those strategies, but in the end I came back to nonviolent communication because it served me in my understanding of well-being, helped me understand that my relationship with well-being was here in my self-responsibility, and that if I wanted to build the connection with him, that to support him to actually restore, that my best supports were actually in the realms of empathy and in compassionately speaking what I was needing and guessing in what he was needing. And he actually is fully recovered and a happy human being these days. So I feel, there's lots in that story, but it's just sort of a nutshell to let you know there's been lots of life experience and training gone into where I am today.
I can really imagine, and thank you so much for sharing and such a heartfelt story. I really, like I'm sure the other viewers, felt the depth of what you were talking about and understood that there was so much more behind what you were explaining. And so I really want to start with, again, appreciating you being on the show and sharing. I really hope that, as other people see that vulnerability and that ability to go, well, this happened. And one of the ways I looked at trying to find my voice in that was to study communications. I did really well, but it didn't quite match what I was looking for. And then you found the non-violent communications, and that started to resonate more and more for you. And then your husband, such a beautiful way of describing, you actually got a real life example of how to work through that as a co-creator of your family unit with your husband and your family, and how that non-violent communication and finding that voice, finding that self-advocacy has been that journey for you, so beautifully described. And I thank you so much for describing it in such a way that other people that, yes, they may have challenges and this and that, but that they can start to see their own threads of ways that they have looked at ways to find their voice, empower themselves, build those resilience and positive focuses that we'll talk about today. So out of all of that, I know many people would be really interested to know, what then is your version of success? What does success mean to you?
So I've been sitting with how best to bring that into a lovely nutshell, because of course, success moves with us, but there's, in terms of its, we grow and learn and we find new definitions as we go. But for me right now, the one that resonates the most is just that success is sitting in a relationship with well-being where it sits at the center of my decision making. As my intention is that well-being always sits in the center of my decision making. So I'll explain that a little bit. What I mean is, actually Zig Ziglar, the American author, talks about the quality of your life is
based on the quality of your questions?
Dependent on the quality of your decision making, yeah.
Or decision making.
The questions you ask and the decision making that you do. Like that your life is an expression of your decision making. And putting that together with, this stepping out of the binary right, wrong, good, bad, what I realized was that, I followed authors early on, like Carolyn Myss, who said, fear or love, where do you want to make your decisions from? And it was very binary. And it made sense to me at the time. It's like, of course, I always want to make my decisions out of love. And at the same time, it's like, is that realistic? Because actually, sometimes I've made decisions thinking they were based in love that haven't worked out as well as they could have. And also making decisions where there's fear involved, sometimes that's great. Sometimes you need to be on the edge of your comfort zone and feel that little bit of adrenaline about stepping into something, doing something new. Like, fear isn't the enemy. That's what I got to, was what is another model that is more inclusive of both the love and the fear, that actually sits us in a place where what else is guiding so we can hold both. And that's
where I love what you're saying, because John Demartini talks about something very similar. He talks about all of that as being different human traits, and we actually each have all of those traits. So we can all tell the truth, we can all lie, we can all be good, we can all be bad, we can all be happy, we can all be sad. And his way of presenting it is he talks about it as being life is a balance. So the balance is understanding that when you've got great success, not getting too carried away because you'll be challenged somewhere else. And when you're being really challenged, understand that elsewhere you'll be having great success. So to look for those different traits and elements in your life, and his approach to it is about balance. But I love what you're saying there about, that the centre of success for you is around well-being, because I think especially with the tips and what we will share with people today, it's around that. How can we help people, and how can we talk about things that can help people to build more of that success and that mindset resilience in their own lives.
Yes.
So in that vein, what would be some of the tips or suggestions that you would share from your experience that may help people, especially with a lot of Australians in lockdown now? So what sort of things would you suggest to people?
I suppose what I'm hearing, what I'm wanting to check is that there's been an understanding of like this shifting from punishing ourselves to arriving at a place where we actually can mourn the impacts of things on ourselves. Like, I suppose that's where I start with that. Well-being comes from, when I talk about well-being, I should clarify, I'm talking about the neuroscience of well-being, and that's 4 attitudes that make up the well-being mindset. The well-being mindset is made up of generosity, gratitude, compassion, and contemplation, or your capacity to focus. So the well-being mindset is a part of a bigger picture, a model of well-being that I work with my clients now. But there's this sense of sitting well-being in the middle of your decision making and actually recognizing where we've been programmed to be outside of those attitudes, those qualities. So I'll just say them again: compassion, contemplation, gratitude, and generosity. Those attitudes have been understood now by the neurosciences as the state of well-being that we want to be in to experience what the word of well-being.
I also really want to start with that point that you mentioned then, and it's really, I think, quite an important one around the grieving and the letting go process. I think one of the things that doesn't necessarily get talked about as much, because it is kind of swept under the table with everybody's, sense of needing to be in the now and deal with these current challenges and issues, is that there is, that sense of loss for the old life and the old security and the old ways of being. But I love how you started with that, because I think that that's really important. Unless you recognise that there could be a bit of a grieving process going on there for you, you're not in the office possibly around your colleagues, so you might be feeling a bit isolated, and you might be, out of work and not know where you're going to get your next work from. There's all sorts of things from that old world that, the last 2 years have really shown us that it's going to keep changing, it's going to keep adapting. But recognising, I think, that there's an element of grieving around that loss of the old.
Definitely.
I guess that comes in with the compassion that you were talking about.
Yeah. I notice as you reflect that, are you getting a bit of audio tension, or is it just at this end?
No, I'm not hearing any.
Okay, that's fine. It seems to have gone. The acknowledging the impacts with a sort of a compassionate heart. Yeah, it is about learning more how to mourn when things don't go the way we'd like. I was talking to a friend last night who had some holiday plans cancelled again. Had been the 3rd time she'd had a vision of trying to get away and have some space from, the home environment that we've all felt locked down in a bit. And she lost that. There was enormous grief for her, for a sense of that loss. And what she'd done, which is part of a habit that all of us can often get caught up in, is start to notice things about herself she was grumpy with, notice things she was grumpy with about other people, notice, without recognizing that grief was the piece of work to do to help her to get back into her softened heart instead of being in the angry, not good enough heart, which it's all a part of the learning. Like, that part of our heart needs its expression too. And if we listen into those underworld feelings, I call them, the anger, grief, guilt, shame, depression, those sorts of experiences are we're still being called underneath towards what is really what we're needing. And this is the learning that we're all doing now as a new way of being, because in the right, wrong, good, bad paradigm, we were externally motivated. And in the new reality of self-responsibility about well-being and about supporting each other's well-being, we're in a co-creation of, how can I support your well-being? How can you support my well-being? But we're also like taking more self-responsibility for our well-being. If I can see inside myself to my anger and frustration and say, I'm really upset and frustrated because I'm longing for the freedom again to travel, and I'm longing for my world to have a sense of the order it did, before, and I'm longing for the sort of comfort of being able to choose my own way in the world. And these aren't our choices currently, not with the level of freedom we've been accustomed to. So being able to, really, really acknowledge that there's been an impact.
It's funny how you're describing it, because I'm remembering back to very early on with the communication studies I was doing, and there was an exercise about when you say X, I feel X, and it was not to blame the person, but to explain, I feel when you do X, Y, Z. And wouldn't it be interesting if people were actually like, COVID, Gladys, Dan, Anastasia, whoever it is that, is your leader, even Scott Morrison. Scott Morrison, when you do X, I feel X or Y or whatever. Just to again acknowledge that, those are your feelings, and it's nothing to do with the Scott Morrisons or Anastasias or Dans, but to name that, when this is happening, this is your reaction to it, to again have that awareness to then take that self-responsibility around it.
Thank you. Let me finish that a little bit from the model point of view, from the nonviolent communications. We would acknowledge our feelings about that, and then we'd go to what needs am I wanting to, what needs are really important to me? Like what is it that this person is or isn't doing that doesn't actually meet my needs? So my need might be for freedom or autonomy or more choice, or might be because I value leadership that really hears what matters to me, that my voice matters. And so we get connected to what really matters to us. It then allows us to stay embodied when we go to have those conversations about what we're really wanting, because then I could go to one of those people and say, this is how I'm feeling, and what I'm really needing is for my voice to matter. And I'm guessing I'm not alone about that. And instead of what we're seeing with the violence, and the other options are expressions of the disagreeing with the strategies. So what happens in our personal lives and in our political and other realities is that we get caught arguing about strategies. I want to go...
It's very divisive. It's either...
Very right, wrong, good, bad.
You're for the vaccine or against the vaccine. You're for the protest or against the protest. There's not like... that, and that's why I remembered that exercise when you were talking, because it wasn't about the protest or the vaccine, it was about this is what I'm feeling, and that first step for people to even be able to acknowledge when this is happening, or you're saying this, or whatever it is, I am feeling X, and that exercise of even getting to that point, I know can be difficult for people. But I'm loving how you're saying, well, once you say I'm feeling or I acknowledge X, then that second part about, well, and what I need from you is Y, and what I would like in this situation is X or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's even what I'm needing separate from the person who's been the stimulus. The cause is actually, well, I value the strategy. The strategy might be vaccination, but what I'm really valuing is everybody's health. I value health so much, and my strategy is vaccination, or my strategy is not vaccination, but the need is the same. And when we can get connected at the level of needs, and stop seeing people and strategies in the oppositional paradigm, in the right, wrong, good, bad, we have more of a chance of having the dialogues that we need to have to enlighten us as to how we can hold all the needs as mattering and find strategies that might work for all. And when we're stuck in the right, wrong, good, bad, we can't see those strategies because we're only interested in whether who's winning and who's losing. And that paradigm isn't very life-serving. That's why it's so important to me about bringing well-being to the center. And let's say, well, well-being would be that our needs matter equally. How can we facilitate ways of having needs on the table and needs mattering? And that's why I'm such a big fan of self-advocacy, is because when we get connected to our true voice about what we're feeling, what we're needing, and making requests of people rather than demands, that's a huge piece of the model that sounds really like, oh, that makes sense. Like, don't demand something, like just ask for it. But we've been so threatened by the right, wrong, good, bad, and the punishment and the reward strategies that it can feel quite scary to actually ask for what we would like in a really open way. It can feel incredibly difficult. So hence my coaching with self-advocacy and supporting clients to do that, and also like building community resilience. So for me, my community of Wise Women Rising, like having other people around you that support what you're attempting to implement, because it is a change and it does take practice with other people to start to speak in a new way.
I agree completely. To have the role models, I always talk about role models, especially with leadership development space. You know, it's very hard to do those new behaviours or new beliefs or actions unless you have those role models. So the Wild Women Rising sounds like a fabulous supportive environment, especially for women who traditionally do have a lot more issues in terms of putting what they want. They might, I think women in general find it easier to maybe express their emotions, but they don't necessarily find it as easy to go, and this is what I would like in this situation, and this is what I would like out of you in this interaction, or any of that sort of thing, because we've mostly been trained to be supportive of others, supportive of the husband, the children, the boss, the this, the that. And so to actually put ourselves, I love that, image I have of it being at the centre of your well-being. And at that centre, what is it that you are then asking for, requesting in your terms, that will support you with your well-being? I think that's really beautiful.
Thank you, Michele. I'm glad it sounds as you reflect what I've said. I really hear that you've grokked it, and also, there's a sense of relief for me that that I've been understood. I get your care, your listening, and in the Wise Women Rising, we're supporting each other to head towards our purpose work, our wise work, we call it. And it's really what happens when we get more aligned to our feelings and needs is that we find our more authentic yes and no, and we find what we're willing to do and what feels like a natural expression of our joy, the work we want to do in the world. And so we're supporting each other to do that. And a number of the women have been carers like me. So, I spent 15 years in a care role. And I think these life experiences that are challenging us often, they shape us. They bring forward in us a willingness to want to contribute, because we've known the suffering, we've seen the difficulties. And I also really celebrate working with conscious men too, because I have this sense of like, we're all in this together. I really don't have the binary around men and women. I just have found that as a community of support, that when I started Wise Women Rising, it was really what I was calling in me as a retreat healing space, after having spent so many years caring and raising 2 kids. And like that's just what my needs were at the time. So I really support what you're saying too about women are in the stereotype in the caring roles often, and can find it really difficult to ask for their needs to matter. Certainly it was true for my mum in her era. That's still true for her today. So we're working on that.
Fabulous. And if people wanted to get hold of you, Karen, where's the best place to find you and find out more about what your wonderful work is?
Oh, thank you, Michele. Activatewellbeing, one word.com. Activatewellbeing.com.
Fabulous. Well, just very quickly, because we're just about out of time, if there was one or two words that you would give to your younger self, what would that be, Karen?
I would say trust the process. This well-being process it's been seeking in me all my life. It's in all nature. All nature seeks well-being. That for all of my challenges and all the difficulties, my mechanism, my honesty, my truth was seeking well-being and working out what was working and what wasn't. And I would just say, please trust the process. There's something innate in you that wants well-being and that wants well-being for others, because we're all interconnected that way. And yeah, to live with that trust and that knowing that it'll all be all right. It'll all be all right.
And what a perfect way to end it with these fabulous words from you, Karen. It will all be all right. And I really hope that everybody is feeling like I am now, just that deep profoundness when talking to people like Karen and hearing such deep, wise wisdom from what are very old souls. Thank you so much, Sherry. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Karen. And to everybody else that's watching, I hope that you've really enjoyed another lens, and this week's lens of looking at building that mindset for success, especially when people may be having a little bit of issues with life at the moment. So thank you again, Karen, for being on the show today.
Thank you, Michelle. What a joy. What a joy. Thank you.
And to everybody watching, from my heart to your heart, until next week, be great, be fabulous, and be you.